This person is labelled as overweight, and this person, me, is also labelled as overweight. If you're higher on the BMI scale, you will be classed as overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. These categories make you feel guilty and unmotivated. But here's the thing, BMI wasn't designed to make you feel bad. It wasn't even originally intended to measure your health. So what's the point of BMI? Why does it constantly appear online and at your doctors? In this video, you're going to stop feeling bad about your BMI by learning what BMI actually means and exactly when it does and doesn't matter. Let's quickly look at the history of BMI so that we have context for everything that's coming up. How old do you think the concept of the BMI scale is? 30 years? 50? Maybe 70? The BMI scale was actually devised between 1830 to 1850, so it's roughly 180 years old. Like I said a moment ago, it wasn't even invented to measure health. Nope, the BMI scale was actually first used as a study of the average man. A Belgian mathematician and sociologist, Adolphe Quetelet, just wanted to discover the socially ideal human, and he did this by dividing body weight in kilograms by height in meters squared. We have easy online calculators for this now. So how did BMI change from sociology to medicine? Things get interesting about 120 years later in 1972. The Journal of Chronic Diseases first used the BMI formula in this year to look at obesity in the context of health. Here's a quote from the author which I want you to think about. He said that BMI was, if not fully satisfactory, at least as good as any other relative weight index as an indicator of relative obesity. Essentially what he's saying here is, yeah, it isn't perfect, but it's the best thing we have. I'm tempted to agree. BMI definitely isn't perfect, but it can be helpful when it's used well. The big problem is it often isn't used well or with care and compassion. What do you think? Let's get into what BMI is actually good for and what its limitations are. There was one specific person that totally changed my understanding of BMI, and here's what he taught me. When I worked at a big gym about 8 years ago, we had a team of physiologists on site. My team and I were all personal trainers. Fitness professionals, but not medical pros. The physiologists were proper scientists who understood the functions and processes of the whole human body from a medical point of view. After I shadowed a full medical assessment, I asked the physiologist what his opinion was on BMI and how it was clarified with other health markers, which we'll be coming to shortly. What he told me clicked immediately. He said that you can never guarantee someone's health outcome. You can't promise diabetes, a stroke, or a heart attack. However, you can analyse risk and how risk increases. If person A had a BMI of 30 last year and this year has a BMI of 33, they've gone up by 10%. They likely have a 10% increased risk of something like diabetes, a stroke, or heart attack compared to last year. If person B had a BMI of 25 last year and this year has a BMI of 30, they've increased their risk by 20%. In my experience, people feel guilty and negative about their BMI increasing because they feel fatter, which is often associated with shame. With this new information, I want you to be able to step away from the emotional reaction and instead look at BMI as a measure of risk. If your BMI goes up, you are not a worse person. However, you are at a higher risk. But what if your BMI goes up because you've gained muscle? Let's talk about when BMI is and isn't relevant. The most common complaint I've heard over 16 years of training real people is that BMI isn't accurate because it doesn't account for muscle mass. On the face of it, this seems like a fair criticism. However, there are two reasons that this needs to be taken with a big grain of salt. Reason one is denial. Of the hundreds of people I've taken through programs and PT sessions over the last 16 years, how many do you think carried enough muscle mass to genuinely justify an overweight BMI not applying to them? I'd estimate somewhere around 40 to 50 people, so maybe 2%. And this is a sample of people who are already going to the gym. BMI is interpreted as a measure of risk, and it applies most accurately to normal people, not athletes or serious recreational lifters. Are you an athlete or serious recreational lifter? I would bet that you're a normal person, and if this is the case, BMI is a good tool for you to gauge your level of health risk. Just because it doesn't fairly apply to most athletes and some serious gym goers doesn't mean that it isn't accurate for you. Critiquing BMI for a reason which doesn't apply to you personally is, well, denial. The most important thing to recognise is that it's denial of your own health risks. If you've gained muscle mass but are still overweight or obese, BMI does still apply to you. Reason 2 might come as a surprise to you. I believe that carrying a big body weight, even when it's predominantly muscle mass, can still place you at an increased health risk. It just makes logical sense. Your heart and lungs pump blood and oxygen around your body. If you're 120 kg of muscle or 120 kg of fat, your heart still has to work much harder than if you were 100 kg because there's more body. An individual with 120 kg of muscle should have a stronger heart and more efficient lungs than someone with 120 kg of fat, but they'll still be working comparatively harder than if they were 100 kg, therefore having increased risk. Now, to the best of my knowledge and research, there are no studies on this at all to prove or disprove my opinion, but it makes logical sense, doesn't it? I've seen a huge number of anecdotal examples from rugby players to bodybuilders to strongmen, big professional athletes who have serious health complications and have to lose weight even though they're mainly muscle mass. Would they have been at the same risk if they were lighter? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. So when does BMI matter and when does it not? So far we've learned that BMI isn't supposed to be about feeling bad about yourself, it should be about assessing health risks. We've learned that BMI almost certainly does apply to you, even if it doesn't apply to athletes and serious lifters. We've also learned why I logically believe that large muscle mass amounts do carry increased risk. So how can we be more accurate when we look at health risks? Back when I worked at the same big gym I spoke about earlier, I had additional training to carry out fairly detailed fitness and health evaluations. We had a base set of guidelines to assess risk and one very simple test which you can easily do at home. We looked for either one high risk marker or at least 2 moderate risk markers. If your BMI is obese or severely obese, this one marker alone is enough to say that you are at an increased risk of heart attack, stroke, or other cardiac incident. However, if your BMI was just overweight, we can qualify this risk. A waist to hip ratio tells us where your body stores its fat. Why does this matter? More fat stored around your midsection means that you are at a higher risk, but if you're overweight with proportionately more fat stored around your hips, your risk isn't considered high. If you're overweight and have high blood pressure, your risk is higher. The same applies for high cholesterol and high blood sugar. The difference is that a waist to hip ratio is easy to check yourself. You just need a mirror and a tape measure to be more accurate about your health risks. You now know the origins of BMI, what it actually means, and how to use it more accurately for yourself. The main thing I want you to remember is that BMI was never designed to make you feel bad or feel ashamed. The purpose of BMI is to assess risk. If you are at a higher risk, decreasing your BMI by losing weight will reduce your risk. You can use a waist to hip ratio, blood pressure test, and cholesterol and glucose tests to be more accurate with your level of risk. But don't be in denial. Just because BMI isn't perfect for everyone doesn't mean that it isn't good enough for you to be honest about your personal level of risk. If this video has helped you to feel less ashamed of your BMI and more objective and empowered with knowledge, then subscribe so you don't miss my next video. Remember that I am a fitness professional and not a medical professional. If you're in any doubt about anything we've discussed, speak to your doctor whose advice trumps mine. Thanks.